For most of history, grain and bread were not side dishes. They could be rent, they could be wages, they could be tax. They could mean the difference between a quiet city and a crowd in the street. And that is why one of the simplest foods ever made kept appearing near the center of power. A loaf of bread looks harmless: flour, water, salt, heat. But behind it is a whole machine. Farmers, rivers, mills, ovens, ships, prices, rulers, and hungry people watching all of it very closely. When that machine worked, kings looked strong. When it broke, people noticed fast. Long before bread became something wrapped in plastic, grain changed the way humans lived. Wild grasses could be gathered, ground, mixed with water, and heated into something dense enough to carry, share, and survive on. Over time, farming made that food more reliable. People could stay in one place longer. Villages grew. Storage mattered. Land mattered. The harvest became a calendar. Bread was one of the foods that made settled life possible. But the moment people depended on grain, they also became vulnerable to whoever controlled it. That is the hidden trade in the story of bread. It gave humans stability, but it also made them easier to govern. A hunter can move. A farming village cannot move so easily. Fields have seasons. Grain has to be guarded. Storage has to be counted. And once a society has counted grain, it can tax it. Bread helped create settled communities, but it also helped create bureaucracy. In ancient Egypt, this was obvious. The Nile flooded, fields grew, scribes counted, granaries filled, and bread became part of daily life. Egyptian workers were not living on golden treasure. They were living on staples. Bread and beer were ordinary, practical, and essential. Beer mattered because it was a daily food as well as a drink, providing energy and nutrition. Bread mattered because it turned grain into portable energy. Together, they became a kind of edible economy. You can imagine the scene: grain being measured, dough being kneaded, ovens smoking, workers taking rations at the end of the day. This was not just cooking. This was administration. A state that could collect grain, store it, and redistribute it could build things: temples, tombs, cities, monuments. Bread fed the hands that built civilization. That does not mean ancient Egypt was powered by bread alone. It means bread sat inside a larger system of land, labor, water, religion, and administration. But that is exactly why it matters. Simple foods reveal complex societies better than royal treasure does. A golden mask tells you what a king wanted to be. A ration tells you how a worker survived, and Egypt was only one version of the pattern. In the Roman world, grain became a question of empire. Rome was a giant city by ancient standards, and giant cities do not feed themselves. They need supply lines, fields far away, ships crossing dangerous water, ports, warehouses, officials, price controls, political promises. Egypt and North Africa became crucial to this system. Grain moved across the Mediterranean toward Rome, where food supply was tied directly to public order. This is where bread becomes political. If the grain ships arrived, the city breathed. If they were delayed, everyone knew. The Roman poor did not care about imperial glory if they could not eat. A ruler could win battles and still face anger at home if the food system failed. Feeding Rome was not charity. It was survival strategy for the state. Bread made empire visible in the most basic way. Could the government keep people alive? And this is where bread becomes a useful way to understand power. Empires often describe themselves through armies, laws, gods, and monuments. But ordinary people experience power through prices, through queues, through whether the market has food in the morning. An empire could look eternal in marble and still feel fragile at the bakery. Centuries later, in medieval Europe, bread still marked social rank. The wealthy could eat fine white bread made from better flour. Poorer people ate darker, coarser loaves made from rye, barley, oats, or mixed grains. The color and texture of your bread could say something about your place in the world. Markets were full of tension because bread was easy to cheat. A baker could make loaves too small. A miller could take too much. Flour could be adulterated. Weight mattered so much that authorities inspected bread, punished dishonest bakers, and regulated prices. That sounds boring until you remember what was at stake. For many families, bread was not one item in the budget. It was the budget. If prices rose, there was no easy substitute. You could not simply choose a cheaper lifestyle when the main thing keeping your children alive became unaffordable. This is why bread laws were so serious. A loaf had to be the right weight. The flour had to be acceptable. The price had to make sense to people who were already close to hunger. A dishonest loaf was not just bad business. It was a threat to public order. In a world without modern welfare systems, the market itself could feel like a battlefield. That pressure kept building across history. Then came France. By the late 1700s, the French monarchy was already in deep trouble. Debt, inequality, political crisis, bad harvests, and anger at privilege all fed the revolution. Bread did not cause everything, but bread made the crisis impossible to ignore. In France, before the revolution, bread could consume roughly 60 to 80% of a wage-earning family's budget. When prices rose, hunger became political very quickly. The famous phrase, "let them eat cake," is almost certainly not something Marie Antoinette actually said. But the myth survived because it captured what people believed about the monarchy, that the people at the top did not understand the hunger below them. That difference matters. A false quote can still reveal a real anger. People did not need the Queen to actually say those words for the story to spread. The story worked because it matched the mood, the feeling that rulers lived in a separate world, protected from the prices and shortages that shaped ordinary life. On October 5th, 1789, thousands of women and other marchers went from Paris to Versailles, driven in part by the high price and scarcity of bread. They were not asking for an abstract theory of government. They wanted food, accountability, and the king brought closer to the capital. Bread had become a demand. And this was not unique to France. Bread riots, grain riots, and food protests appear again and again in history because hunger turns politics into something immediate. You can debate rights for years. You cannot debate an empty table for long. That is the pattern across this story. Bread starts as survival. Then it becomes labor, then tax, then trade, then law, then protest. Every loaf carries a hidden chain behind it. Someone grew the grain. Someone owned the land. Someone collected the tax. Someone controlled the mill. Someone set the price. Someone waited in line. Someone went hungry. That is why bread appears again and again when societies are under stress. The same food that made cities possible could also reveal when those cities were failing. This is the reason bread has such strange historical power. It is ordinary enough to be ignored when everything is working, but the moment it becomes scarce, expensive, adulterated, or unfairly distributed, it becomes a signal. It tells people something is wrong before official speeches do. Today, bread can feel ordinary because modern supply chains hide the struggle. You walk into a shop, pick a loaf, and leave. The fields, fuel, labor, transport, weather, and politics stay invisible. But when prices rise, the old truth returns. Bread is still more than food. It is a test of whether a society can keep its most basic promise. Feed people, and the world feels stable. Fail to feed them, and even the smallest loaf can become revolutionary.